And now we call on our Speakers Bureau Chair, Bill Pieper, to introduce our speaker.
It's a pleasure to welcome Greg Ustler back to speak to the club. We all know Greg is basically, I refer to him as Mr. Downtown. He's done more to develop downtown and the surrounding neighborhoods than anybody I know of. Just so you're aware of it, those of you may not know, Craig is owner and president of Ustler Development Inc. and a real estate development company, and vice president of Ustler Properties, a commercial real estate brokerage company. He's been in the business for 20 years, and you can see his thumbprint on so much of downtown and the surrounding area. He's here today to give us an update on the Creative Village. So please welcome back Greg Ustler.
Hi, everybody. A couple of things before we get started that I always like to say when I come to Rotary. So thanks to Bill for having me. Bill and I go way back. Bill is a great leader for Orlando, always cared about downtown Orlando as it related to the tourist sector and everything. That was very important. We see all that as mutually beneficial. And I think that's important as we work on what we do in downtown to remember the way that Orlando is seen throughout the world as a tourist destination. So I always appreciate that collaboration and his friendship. And then I always mention too on the Rotary Club, I certainly appreciate your service. I speak at a lot of community organizations. It's always satisfying to be at an organization that's based in service. I was speaking to a group at UCF in Valencia last week, where y'all's next meeting will be. And I was trying to impose upon them how important, especially in this day and age, how important community service is. It's one of the things I love about Orlando. I've been here my whole life and I recognize a lot of the names and faces in the crowd, and I appreciate that. And I also like the fact that you can be new to town, you can come join things like Rotary and plug right in. So I appreciate everything that you guys do for Orlando, and I don't want you to think it goes unnoticed. I'm sure you don't get as many thank yous as you'd like, but thank you for the work that you do. So we're going to talk about Creative Village, and it'll be quick because this has been a 10 or 12 year project that we'll try to, summarize in 20 or 25 minutes and then have questions at the end. And so I'll kind of fly through some images and whatnot, and then we can talk about any questions that you have. And in a situation like this, I like to really hit on kind of what I call the story, because there's a lot of interesting background on the personalities involved and how a deal came about and everything. So that'll kind of try to be my focus. This is an overview picture. We're going to go through some of the background real quick. So does everybody remember the old Amway Arena? Like Shaq and Penny when we were good? Okay, that was it. This is the site. The city owned that, and there's a boundary around it. The real key to understand here is it's 68. The site of Creative Village is 68 acres, all owned by the city. So that's very important. 68 acres of contiguous real estate in an urban environment like downtown Orlando is unheard of. It would typically take forever to assemble one site under single ownership. So that was very important. And the second piece that was important was this was in the very beginning, this was an outdated basketball arena facility with a parking lot. So it wasn't like you were talking about redeveloping area that was being used with housing or anything like that. So it was important to kind of be able to envision kind of a higher and better use for what it used to be. We ultimately, the city did a lot of internal planning the way they typically do and had a task force and things like that. We came together with put a development group together, my company and Bank of America, and we responded to a city solicitation for proposals about how we could do a public-private partnership, and we ultimately entered into that. And we have a bunch of legal agreements with the city of Orlando where we control, they still own the land until we decide to buy it, but we undertake development activities per these agreements, and they run through 2031. And that seemed like a long time when we started, but now we're halfway into that. We started in 2011, and so now it's 2021. And so we did a lot of planning work on the upfront. So this is just a summary of what we did in the beginning. So the picture at the top right is when we imploded the old Amway. This all happened, in concurrence with the new Amway Center being built. So if you really just want to think about it in real estate terms, the new Amway Center made the old Amway kind of excess land, if you want to think about it that way. And the city needed something to do with that land. So ultimately, we came up with our plan. We get picked by the city. We tear down the arena, and we go basically. There's a lot of history behind this, but if you remember, when we were in a recession, there was a lot of government funding available, a lot of grants, a lot of economic stimulus and recovery type stuff going on. So part of our business model was to go after all those dollars in partnership with the city and really kind of interject out of market dollars or federal dollars or grants from other organizations into the project, improve the infrastructure, and then wait for the market to get better. So I don't know if that sounds like a good real estate plan or not. It sounded okay at the time, but because part of it was based on there was real money available that we could draw down from the federal government, and part of it was just hope the market gets better. It's not a real strategy, but we did think Orlando obviously was going to be good over the long term. So we ultimately pulled down about $25 million of federal funding and other funding where we improved the infrastructure in and around the old arena and made it ready for development. And then we did a bunch of planning and zoning and legal stuff that is not very exciting in my line of work, but it's necessary to effectuate the value. Entitlements are ultimately what's worth money in real estate. So if you take a piece of land like this that it had a civic use and essentially no entitlements, and you go get it entitled for thousands of residential units and millions of square feet of office space, you create value. So that was sort of the way, on paper at least, we created value. So we start going forward, see what we can put together. One of the first things we were successful in was getting the partnership with UCF and Valencia done. This was, I like to say, when we started the project, we hoped to do this. It was not done, but it was certainly, it was our vision and the mayor's vision that UCF as a public university and Valencia as a public state college, and having the great relationship that they do, could anchor Creative Village as a public academic institution. And that ended up working out. They commit to the campus. We go through all the necessary approvals that takes with the state and whatnot. And there's some other community and philanthropy type stuff that goes with it. But ultimately, we held the groundbreaking for Creative Village downtown campus for UCF and Valencia in May of 2017. That was a big day. Another kind of funny story about how this all happened, because I tend to tie all this back to sports. I can't figure out. That's just the way my mind works. So if you remember when UCF was really good on one of their first runs and Blake Bortles was the quarterback, they played in the Fiesta Bowl in Phoenix. And the president of UCF then, Dr. Hitt, he flew to Phoenix for that game. He got exposed to the downtown campus at Arizona State. Arizona State's main campus is in Tempe. It's about 15 miles east of town, not dissimilar from the way UCF is set up, but they did a 10,000 student downtown campus. Very similar to what we were hoping to achieve here. And it wasn't until Dr. Hitt saw that in action that he believed and he committed to the downtown campus. It was really on the plane flight home from that game that he got in touch with Mayor Dyer and said, I get what you're saying. I've seen it with my own eyes. And I think what you've envisioned for downtown Orlando is worthwhile. So it was an interesting stroke of luck in the sense that if UCF wouldn't have been playing in that football bowl game, who knows what would have happened. But that's how it kind of came together. And Valencia was committed the entire time and was waiting for UCF to announce their commitment. So that was good and important and very impactful. I think we would all agree to deliver world-class public education in Paramore is very impactful to that neighborhood. And it kind of flips the equation from an area of disinvestment to an area that you can get a great public education. So that was the number one building block for Creative Village. And then there's a bunch of other stuff that we were working on. Downtown Orlando is growing like crazy as we recovered from the recession. You guys have all seen it with your own eyes. I mean, just the amount of apartments and whatnot that's happened downtown since we recovered from the recession in 2011 or 12 has been impressive. And then, as I mentioned, the mayor's community venue plan really came together. Some pieces on the transportation side came together. Sunrail on this station and everything was not a reality when we started Creative Village. So part of the idea was to hopefully get Creative Village and a bunch of critical mass there, right adjacent to this transit station. So that worked. And there's a bunch of other stuff happening with parks and open space. New plans for that and how important that is that we were part of also. So this was all just a way of saying the momentum was building. And we continued to work sort of on our master plan and specifically what we would do at Creative Village. It's somewhat, if you think about real estate development, this sounds weird to say. So one of the most daunting things that can happen to you as a developer is someone hands you a piece of land and just says, figure it out. Especially if it's 68 acres, because it's not, because there's a lot of different things you could figure out. It's not like just someone, it's not like one lot where you can say, oh, we should build a house there. Or you can just kind of look around and say, oh, there's 5 other, churches in this neighborhood. Maybe we'll build another one. Like that's more obvious. This was not obvious what to do with it. And so we had to, you kind of got to figure out how you want to plan. The way our office works and the way that I always run the business. So I sort of start with these community goals, get the city to agree on those goals. And then we sort of use real estate as kind of the toolkit to accomplish those goals. But our plan is really rooted more in sort of opportunities or outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Another thing that's important about thinking like this when you think about master real estate development is when I went to sell this to all the stakeholders, the neighborhood and the city commissioners and the mayor and everybody likes these things. So you typically don't go in and say, hey, do you love a new real estate project with a bunch of new square footage and a bunch of new traffic? That's not a good place to start. A good place to start is to say, do you support these things? And then if you support these things, we have a real estate project that can make them happen. And so we ultimately come up with this plan, which should look very simple. Building good cities is very simple. The grid pattern has worked throughout history very well. And so all we did was really reestablish a street grid and come up with different parcels and different uses and sort of a block and a takedown plan about how to do this over time. There's nothing really that meaningful about all the numbers you see because it's all flexible. And so all the entitlements can move around, the uses can move around, we can respond to the market. The only thing I think that's kind of important to remember is we straightened out Livingston. If y'all remember, Livingston used to curve. We straightened out Livingston, reestablished the connection, and then just in really general sense, everything south of Livingston is public university, public college, and everything north of Livingston's private development. The general nature of the business model of the city of Orlando is that we as the master developer either undertake ourselves or go get partners to do private development. And we buy the land through a purchase option contract from the city, all the land north of Livingston. The city gifted the land south of Livingston to UCF. So it's one of those things where we make enough money to make a reasonable return. The city does too, but then we also do these civic and sort of for the public good uses. And so that was the original idea. It's pretty much held. This is just a different way of kind of showing you what we've done. And the colors are important just because you're going to hear me talk about phase 1, what we've done with phase 1, what we've completed, what we've got to do. But the idea is still sort of, if you think about the bottom 1/3 of the page kind of as the public use and the top 2/3 of the page is the private development with a park in the middle. Just gives you a good idea of the general plan. We did a ton of studying in other cities. I mean, all of those of you that travel a lot, there's certain cities that in the United States that are really progressive in the way their downtowns have developed. I don't mean New York City and Boston, Chicago, cities that are so big, Orlando shouldn't be aspiring to be them. I mean, like Portland and Austin and Nashville. These are cities that have been progressive about the way they develop that we emulated and we sort of build images around. These images are from those cities and whatnot. And so we build sort of our plan around that. You hear the term live, work, play. We sort of added learn to that, given the educational piece. Mobility is important. A lot of the grants we got were based on mobility. I don't agree very much with how transportation planning and engineering works and the way that sort of federal dollars fund highways and all that stuff. It's a formula. It doesn't really work in Orlando's favor, given our population and everything. But the reality is the federal government controls the vast majority of transportation dollars. They just get allocated to the state and then you apply for them and all. So that was a big pot of money that was there. And we used that money to expand the limo system, the free bus circulator, and then a lot of the scooters and bike share and all that you see now. So that was important. I talked earlier about the campus and the campus is about 15 acres. I think everybody's aware of UCF, second or first, I mean, depending on what number you use, largest public university in the country, right? Huge 76,000 students roughly enrolled at UCF right now. And in Valencia, a tremendously well-regarded state college, about 80-something thousand enrollees if you count full and part-time. So you're talking about 160,000 students plus or minus combined between those two institutions. And they have a very, very good relationship, which we should not take for granted. Many other cities we visited, the state college, or what we used to call community college, and the public university don't get along. But in UCF, in Valencia's case, they get along great. And this was a wonderful opportunity for them. We also have a lot of sort of green and sustainable stuff we focus on. This is all because you're a partner with the city. It's not like developers roll out of bed and think about this stuff sort of automatically. I do, but not most developers. But the fact that we're a partner with the city means we have to pay attention to energy efficiency and green initiatives and master planning for stormwater and a bunch of things like that. So this is also a very responsible development in that regard. We're going to just run through a few images of downtown campus, but the takeaway I want you to remember about the downtown campus is that downtown Orlando is the campus. The whole idea here was if you're a pre-legal, like a legal studies major at UCF, or if you're a government administration major, you need to be where the jobs are and where the internships are. And you were basically in an inferior position by being 15 miles east of town. So the programs that came downtown are all based on the programs are better by being adjacent to where those industries are located. So you look at this 15-minute walk radius, we consider that the downtown kind of catch basin for the campus. And this is a numerical example of that. So on the main campus, if you're a legal studies major, there's 31 law firms within a few miles where you can go intern. Downtown, there's 768. So the idea is you just move programs to where they benefit from the adjacency. This is called location-based learning. That was a term I didn't know before we started. It's the same reason the Rosen School exists on International Drive, UCF's Rosen School of Hospitality, because you want to put the college or the school adjacent to where the industry is based. So the same idea applies to the downtown campus. And this is all the majors that made sense for. And then UCF went and got some buildings built. So the building on the right is brand new. The building on the left is renovated. Y'all see these when you go to your next meeting. These kind of anchor the downtown campus. One of the things you'll see at Valencia that's super interesting, we already touched on one, accelerated skills and training program. Extremely important, especially the Paramore neighborhood. These are 8 and 16-week degree programs. These are not 2 and 4-year college degrees. Really, really impactful. Somebody can wrap their mind around a shorter term commitment like that. And then the culinary program that you'll see at Union West when you guys visit there, underwritten by Disney World, really a big deal, largest culinary facility of any community college in the country, and really impressive. Another term that I taught myself is cradle to career. So cradle to career means you can be born in Paramore and have access to great public education from the time you're in the cradle till you start working in your career, like at EA Sports or wherever. So this is a model that kind of drove our thinking about how we built the educational ecosystem. And then these are going to be pictures of what we've accomplished. So in the middle of 2022, about 2 more months, we'll complete the park and we'll be done with phase 1 of Creative Village. And this is what phase 1 looks like. So the left is the old picture that we saw at the beginning. The right's the new picture with all the buildings that we've built. The first building that we delivered at Creative Village was called Amelia Court. It was affordable housing. You heard me talk about the commitment with the city. Part of our commitment to the city is to deliver affordable housing. And that's something that should be part of the commitment in Paramore. It's something I think we all understand. There's just the affordability issue in Central Florida is a crisis. You can't build your way out of it, but it's still important to do what you can. So this was a commitment that we made, and it was important to deliver the first project at Creative Village. Was 256 units of affordable housing. Next project that came online was a downtown campus building itself a month or 2 later. So this was UCF and Valencia's new buildings that we looked at before with about 8,000 students on day 1. And then diagonal across the street, we privately developed with a partner, Union West, where y'all have your meeting. This has student housing, has a culinary facility, has some other academic space, has retail tenants on the ground floor. We opened this building in August of 2019 at 98% leased. And this was the largest privately financed building ever built in downtown Orlando. It was on the west side of I-4, which nobody ever would have predicted. So that was kind of a big deal for us to show that we could do this in an area that nobody believed in the beginning. And then next door, we did the Julian Apartments. This then became the This is the second largest privately financed building at the time. There's ones bigger than this now, but at the time on the west side. So this is market rate apartments. The previous building I showed you was student housing. So this is market rate apartments, what we might call luxury apartments. So you see there's affordable housing, student housing, and then luxury. So we cover a full range of housing options. This is also where the Monroe restaurant is located. If you've been over there, very successful restaurant by a Good Salt Restaurant Group, who have Reyes and Osprey and Sato Sushi. So this has worked out really well. These apartments leased up really well. We exited this asset at the end of last year and did very well. And then this project just opened. This is called Modera. This is a second apartment project. You'll see it when you're over there. This was done by Mill Creek, third-party developer. We just sold them the land and they developed it. This is EA, Electronic Arts Corporate Studio. We completed this in October of 21. We self-developed this project. This is about 1,000 high-wage jobs. Not just that they're high wage, these are jobs that everybody wants. I mean, if you're young and someone says you can get paid $100,000 a year to design video games for a living, you're like, where do I sign up? and EA was our target from the beginning. They were in Maitland. They were the perfect fit for Creative Village. None of this was done when we started, but I certainly had a hope that we would be able to land them, get them to relocate to downtown. They're just getting back to work on the office program. They did a really cool building with the exterior mural and everything. So it's really great to have them downtown and have them be the corporate anchor of Creative Village. This was a huge win for us. Really, the downtown campus between UCF and Valencia and EA were big wins. And then the park that you'll see under construction when you're over there is being done by the city. About another month or two before we wrap that up, 2.3 acres. It's called Luminary Green. Really important to have a public green space in the middle of the development that's built for everybody. So when the park's done, that'll represent completion of phase one. About $700 million in investment. That's a huge amount of money. We don't have as good a PR agent as like Lake Nona or people like that, and that's on purpose. But we have accomplished a lot at Creative Village, and we're not out, bragging about what we've done or anything. But we do like to say that between the master development team in the city, we have delivered on what we said we were going to do, and then some. And we should be very happy of what was a parking lot is now this, and it's thousands of people living there and thousands of people working there and 8,000 students and a new park and all that thing. So we're very proud of what we've accomplished and proving that we could do it on the west side. It takes a village. This is all I do is I'm just the quarterback. We work with all these people at Creative Village in various capacities to make it happen. These are all really, really good partners that I'm fortunate to work with. These are all best in class folks at what they do. So we do all the, if you think about like a quarterback on a football team, or like conducting an orchestra, that's really what I do all day is make sure all these people are doing what they're supposed to do, and then all kind of comes together. I do want to leave you with a hopefully when you go over there and you see it and you'll have your meeting, you'll be impressed and you'll be excited and you'll say, man, they've accomplished a lot. I never thought they could do that. That's good. Those of y'all that know me personally, it's not my personality. I'm always just thinking about what the next thing is and how we can do better. So there's a lot left to do. We're about 40% of the way done with Creative Village. So there's 60% of it left. And so this is what that might look like. We got 3 parcels that we're working on now. Financial market challenges notwithstanding, we were talking about earlier. So assuming that we can continue to move forward and get these projects financed and built, we're talking about the next office building, the next hotel, and the next residential tower at Creative Village. We need a new hotel. We're after those of you all familiar with Moxie. It's a Marriott brand. It's kind of like an A-loft. It's a young brand. It's what EA wants for their young employees. So that's the hotel that we're doing. And then we need to build another office building. EA's office building is only for EA. So we need to build an office building where we can accommodate other creative tenants and tech tenants and all at Creative Village. And then the next apartment project, which is 25 stories tall, is important too, because that'll establish kind of an architectural presence on the west side. This is what that looks like, rendering of that. The Moxie Hotel on the left, the office building on the right, and the apartment in the background. If everything goes right, we would bring this online in 2024 or 2025. And then this is just where that goes. When you guys get over there, you'll, as I said, you'll see this is all sort of really solid urban planning. We have a park in the middle and then these uses that frame the park. But that's the scale of development that we've been able to deliver. I think that's probably more than anybody thought when we started. If we'd have told you we were going to build 10, 15 story, that type of scale on the west side, I think that would have seemed pretty aggressive. I think I would have thought the same thing. But I think that speaks to how we've all been able to work together with our partners and really get a good outcome. There's about, after you look at the parcels we're working on now, there's about another 6 parcels that'll take easily through 2031, if not longer. There's certainly things we've learned. This housing, I don't even know what to call the housing thing in Central Florida, and I've lived here my whole life. There's hyper demand for housing, right? The real estate market is, whatever word we were using earlier, crazy is the best. I mean, you just can't even hardly put the numbers around residential housing demand. And so we underestimated that at Creative Village and really throughout downtown Orlando. You just cannot build enough apartments. I mean, the demand is almost insatiable, and it's that way for several years, if not longer. So we've got to tweak our entitlements and figure out how to do more residential to meet the demand. And we've got to build more different types of residential. So it's not enough just to build expensive. It's not enough just to do affordable. You got to build the middle. We call that workforce housing or attainable housing. So we got to really get sharper, got to sharpen our pencil on how to deliver residential supply. And then I got to figure out if anybody can give me the crystal ball answer. What's office space look like in 2 years? We were talking about being back to work. Some people are, some people aren't. Hybrid, flex. Do we need office space? Absolutely. Do you have to collaborate with your colleagues? Of course you do. Does anybody know exactly what that looks like? Or exactly how much of it you need? Or does it mean tenants are going to shrink or expand? Or are they going to do both? And I'm going to end up right back where I started. I don't know. So that's something we're thinking about. I don't even like the word office, by the way. I like the word collaboration space or studio space or production space or something like that. And then these are photos from this month. So Bill, this is my tourist photo of, you can see downtown Orlando, but you can see where us are. So see how close it looks to downtown? It's all very strategically done. Then I-4 went down the middle. But this does go to show you sort of how we've built a little district in Paramore, and it is really adjacent to Orlando. I also like the way you, at the top of the slide, you can see where the new Amway Center is, right? So you kind of know you're on the old slide versus new side. To the right, sort of same idea. I think that's probably actually the same photo, just looking sort of backwards way at it, right? And these are the last couple of images I want to leave you with before we take questions and talk. I use this shot. This is an artistic shot that one of our photographers did from a drone. But the reason I point this out is the architectural quality is very good. And it's important at Creative Village to do good design. One of the things that we, as a real estate development community, have done a bad job of is when we go into a challenged neighborhood, a place that's been disinvested in for a long time, the default answer is kind of to build something that just looks okay. I mean, we've all seen housing projects, and they look like the projects. I mean, they look like they were done on the cheap, but they look like they weren't done the right way. So we really committed to architectural guidelines at Creative Village that make this be the answer. And these are as nice as any buildings in downtown Orlando, and that was important. And we feel like the neighborhood was owed that. Same with the EA building. I mean, this one was very budget constrained. I mean, you can imagine EA and their 175,000 square foot tenant, huge corporate anchor that they know we want desperately. Those were, I negotiated that deal. That was pretty one-way street for the first several meetings. There was a lot of me walking in and saying, "What would you like?" And then I said, "Thank you," and left. There wasn't a lot of back and forth. And we ultimately did get into a very productive and mutual beneficial agreement. But I still wanted their building to look good, and I really appreciate their commitment to the outdoor screen and the public art, because it adds kind of a cool factor to the building. To remember that image. This is, as I was talking about, the future office building, hotel and apartment high rise. The apartment high rise on the right hand side, right next to the Bob Carr, is important because I think it's neat to have a 25-story. That's about as tall as the View in downtown Orlando. It'd be really neat to have that on the west side, because you can have that way. I think some people's mind is shut off to the west side because they don't see anything architecturally significant over there. So that's important to us. That's it. I know that was fast, but it probably was right on my time. And I'm happy to talk about, thank you. Bill, you've got the microphone. If anybody wants to ask me any questions.
The volume on, a little more. Chris?
Obviously Bob Carr sits right in the middle of
Yep.
all that stuff. What do you think the future of that is?
So this is the way the Bob Carr story goes amongst friends. The development plan that we had in the beginning allowed the Bob Carr to be torn down, and I didn't tell my mom. And so it became known that we were allowed to tear down the Bob Carr. She did not call me. She got in touch with Mayor Dyer and said that she wasn't okay with that. And it needed to change because she had seen Elvis Presley at the Bob Carr and I had graduated high school there and everything. And that just wasn't going to be all right. So I got a call from him and he says he's changed his mind. We are now not allowed to tear down the Bob Carr. And I said, I had no idea that's where it came from. So I heard the story later. So now what we are going to do, which is the right thing to do, we're going to adaptively reuse and reinvent the Bob Carr as a civic and community space as it has been, but for what we say that is the next century. So it's unlikely to be performance arts based, but it's very likely to be digital arts and digital media and kind of like innovation center based, and be heavily involved in educating women and minorities in those fields because they're still very underrepresented. So we foresee a partnership between UCF, Valencia, EA Sports, and some other corporate partners in the city being included about how the Bob Carr would still have meeting space for things like this. It would still have the ability to have what we call an assembly hall for things like graduations and be used for some of the uses it's been used for historically. So that's what I think will happen with the Bob Carr. Honestly, I had pretty good traction on the Bob Carr before COVID. And we had done some designs. The mayor was chomping at the bit. We were kind of where we needed to be. And we've struggled to reignite those conversations post-COVID. We do have a workshop with the city scheduled to talk about in August. So I'd love to tell y'all today what we're going to do with it, because I think it's important to the community. I mean, at some point, everybody wants to know. So I'm not quite there yet, but that's where we're headed.
Greg, my family goes back about 100 years in Orlando, lived on Church Street in the old Orlando Hotel and ran it about 100 years ago, which became a Rosie O'Grady's. Lived right near downtown, worked in downtown my entire life, gone to church downtown most of my life until we moved a ways out. And I just want to thank you for all you've done for redeveloping this area. Of course, that was the old fairgrounds way back when. And Paramore, of course, was a crime riddled area. And, what you've done is just made it world class. Hopefully you're getting all kind of awards and appreciation from all kind of people instead of a bunch of hassle, because you're doing a surface doing this. And any of the other developments that you did, didn't you do something on Orange Avenue that was pretty big?
Yeah, we've really worked we've worked everywhere. Creative Village, I was jokingly saying, you're talking about getting hassle or whatever. The work we did in Thornton Park and downtown, even with something like the Crest building, we did Crest Chop House in the Crest building with Rob Yeager, restored all that and everything. And so you'd think everybody's like jumping up and down that you did something like that. And you never know who your neighbors are and who wants everything. So the key to Creative Village, and one of the reasons it was so attractive to me, is we got that zoned in 2011 and no one can do anything about it now. So if you don't like it, if you want to change it, there's nothing you can do to undo it. And I don't have to go through the zoning and the public thing every time. So I appreciate you saying that, but I think in some ways I got so many battle scars from the original.
I do have a question though. What's your biggest challenge? And I know one of the big challenges we've had downtown Orlando, which really has concerned me, is all the bums that we have sleeping and laying around in between here underneath the expressway. What are we going to do to control those in your park and all that?
So the biggest challenge is quality of life issues, right? So this is what's really tough about being a mayor or a developer. So building the hardware of a downtown. So that's the buildings and the projects and the parks. That's the hardware. You do that. City of Orlando's done a great job with that. So then you got to go manage the software, which is the quality of life kind of issues. And this has to do with public safety, homelessness, social issues, all that kind of stuff, right? And so you may or may not have thought you were managing that well. I happen to think we were managing it fairly well pre-COVID. COVID turns on its head how you can manage some of those issues. The ability to be, I guess I'll use the word, the ability to enforce what you might think are reasonable ways to sort of manage certain situations downtown, public safety or otherwise, aren't the same pre-COVID and given the sort of social circumstances that we're in as they were a couple of years ago. Some of that's for good reasons, some of it's not for good reasons. But if you're managing a downtown and managing a public space, it's just harder to do. I think that probably gets progressively better over time as downtown recovers, as we get everybody back to working, as everybody, I think most everybody's, familiar with the Performing Arts Center and everything. And as you see the investment that's been made there and you get critical mass, everybody going to those things, I think it probably gets incrementally better as we work forward. But I hear you. It's something that we, deal with all the time and we think about. And it's really something that I will say that the desire to do better is there. There's disagreement on the methodology to do that. And that's where we kind of stub our toes sometimes.
Real quick, great presentation. Towards the middle, you mentioned about being smarter about how you go about doing, I guess, some of the acquiring and investing or funding rather. Is there still an opportunity for small to middle-sized investment firms or equity firms to get involved in some of this development?
Yeah, so I should have mentioned that too. So another place that I want to say we missed, but that we haven't gotten to yet. So when you look at these big projects that we've done so far, these are big real estate projects, $100-something million real estate projects, Fifth Third, Truist, Bank of America. Those are the lenders. Our equity partners are Prudential. And I mean, it's a big institutional whatnot. That's what you do when you build huge real estate projects. And that's great. That's not good for me and you. That doesn't help the local, that ultimately doesn't speak to the purity of the Creative Village vision, which is that there's a place for small and medium size. Yeah, so we need to figure out within the new office building, we're contemplating a floor being kind of that, what I would call on-ramp to being able to have office space and access to resources and being able to invest. We're talking about crowdfunding out of that same thing to be a slice of our real estate capital stack and everything. So I hear you. We hear that often from the community that me included, being the Orlando guy. Hey, we'd love the opportunity to get directly involved and invest our money or have our office there or be able to do co-working there or whatever. So yes, we're just not there yet. But Eddie, that's definitely part of the plan. And I'm hyper focused on that for the next building.
Craig, thank you for a great presentation. One of the things that occurs to me is looking at your village and your presentation, you've really cut down on cars.
Mhm.
You've made it public space and other public kinds of transportation. Because your village is so far ahead, then I look across I-4 at old downtown Orlando,
Yep.
if you will. Your development is putting such pressure on the rest of downtown. Is it time for us to consider turning Orange Avenue into a walking business mall like 16th Street in Denver?
So the thing that I don't know, but I think the city understands. So the city's updating their master plan for downtown. You can decide whether you think that's good or not. This is a lot of planning consultants that sometimes understand reality and sometimes don't. But they think about a lot of things like you just mentioned, and they think about what's old downtown, which is Orange Avenue. And there's some challenges with the age of the building stock and the age of the sidewalks and the infrastructure and things versus something that's newer like we're building, and how does sort of one work against the other? That's a good question about how do those coexist. And ultimately, we're not necessarily the target market. Right? You need to be building your downtown for 25, 30-year-olds, young. That's the vast majority of who's living in the multifamily. That's who the students are. That's who works at EA. They all like to walk and bike and ride scooters and do anything but drive a car. And so I think you got to come at it from that mentality. And then I for sure think there's a lot we can do with our street network. I've waffled between going sort of pure pedestrian all the time versus going two-way and a lot more pedestrian friendly, but you still being able to use the road sometimes in certain hours. So I don't know that I have an exact transportation engineering answer, but the big idea is correct. We have to humanize our downtown, especially the roads and the streets. The new master plan for Lake Eola is very good. The plans for Under Eye are very good. The park at Creative Village is very good. We got to humanize the streetscape. Ultimately, the street's your biggest park. It's your biggest public space. It's got to be more walkable. It's got to be safe. It's got to be cleaner, everything we were talking about. Mayor Dyer comes back from every US conference of mayors and says that. He knows that. I mean, the mayors get this. The mayors of the good cities know what attracts visitors and know what attracts talent. Again, the way to get that accomplished in the world of transportation engineering and federal dollars and policing laws about what you can and can't do, that's different. I mean, that's a different set of, sort of parameters you're dealing with. But as I said, I think the big idea, Mayor Dyer has been talking to me now for years. What do we do with Orange Avenue? What do we do with Magnolia? We're going to do a complete street on Robinson, north of Lake Eola. How do we make this connection between under the interstate be, public art and well lit and all that stuff instead of what it is now? So I think all those ideas are on the table, and I hear you. It's not good for Church Street and Orange Avenue to be in the sort of the condition that they're in right now. Any of us that are from here, we know people kind of default to Church Street. Even the Church Street station's been closed for a long time. We need the heart of your city has got to be good. Orange Avenue and Church Street need to be good. It's just a matter of a lot of those properties have recently changed hands, and I think they're in good ownership now. And we need to make sure we support that. We're always trying to make sure that we're just part of the solution.
Thank you. Cities around the world, this is probably the best way to grow cities around the world. I lived overseas for 25 years and was very involved in creating a new city for New Zealand.
Mhm.
And this is the way it needs to go. One thing I wasn't sure if you had was for all the people that live there and work there and go to school there, is there medical facilities?
Right. Interesting that you said that. So when we started planning Creative Village, I thought I had it, you always think you have it all covered. That was right in the emergence of health and wellness and sort of community design, walkability, and all that really affecting health outcomes, right? And so if you live in an active neighborhood where you walk places and you interact with other humans every day and you have good spiritual health and mental health and physical health, you're healthier, you live longer in those type of communities than you do in suburban sprawl communities. We were just on the forefront of that, and we did not incorporate health and wellness in the beginning at Creative Village like we should have. We have sort of re-engineered that now, and we're in the process of working with Advent Health about what that's going to look like at Creative Village, and they will have a presence, and then we're going to have a master plan sort of overlay on the health and wellness side. But it's a very good point. There's what we call a food desert sort of challenge in Paramore too, right? There's not fresh food or a grocery store and all that kind of stuff. So you got to tend to address that, and you need to address some access issues, technology and whatnot. It's a weird situation where you might think telehealth, and I know we're on Zoom for this meeting and all this is good, but that actually discriminates against lower income folks who don't have access to broadband or whatever, right? So we have to do better on that. And we've asked them to help us do that and figure out how we can do it. But man, that's something that's changed in 10 years since we started. So we're going to do that in retrospect, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. One of the biggest problems we have is housing. What's the size of your average apartment, and what are you renting them for? And how many do you have?
Right. So in total, we've got about 1,000 apartments, and we built them across 3 income stratifications. We've affordable housing, which are rent controlled by the state of Florida, and the entry point for those is 30% of area median income. So that means rents start at less than $1,000 a month. And then we have student housing in the middle, which started about $750 for a bed of student housing. And then we go all the way up to market rate apartments, which are luxury apartments that start at about $1,100 or $1,200 a month for a studio. All of that stuff is tremendously expensive, no matter how you do the math, right? And the waiting list for affordable housing, when you bring that online, is thousands of people. So if you deliver 250 units of affordable housing, your waiting list will be 4,000 people. You just can't build your way out of it. There's just no, so one of the speeches I gave in the beginning, reason the education piece is so important, because with housing, you can change the numerator and the denominator. So if someone makes more money, and they can, and the quickest way to do that is through education, right? So we gotta attempt to move the lever in both directions, because if not, we can never build enough. I mean, you literally would need to deliver 1,000 apartments like every week for the next 3 years or something, just to get to even, you know what I mean? I mean, it's just impossible. So I think that we're cognizant that we need more housing. We want to do better. We want to do it at scale. So we need to build 300 and 400 units at a time instead of 200. We really need to focus on getting scale. But I don't have, other than to say that we're more focused on it, I don't have a solution for how we change the situation we're in. It's purely supply and demand. There's too many people that want to live in Florida, and there's not enough places to put them. The only thing I would always ask you to consider when you're thinking about the affordable housing problem is ask yourself the alternative. So a place that doesn't have an affordable housing problem is Detroit or Cleveland or Hartford, Connecticut. So the way you don't have an affordable housing problem is you lose population and you lose jobs, right? That's the only way to not have one. If you grow population and grow jobs, you're going to have a housing shortage. It's just a question of to what degree. So I think we need to address it to a degree. I don't think we need to solve it, if that makes sense, but we need to do a better job.
Craig, thank you very much for
Okay.
all you do for the
Thank you.
city, and thanks for the presentation.
Thank you.
Every time we have a presentation like this, the thought occurs to me that almost 10 years ago, Pew Research did a study and looked at GDP as the national income, and then showed how national income is flowing to the educated. And the inequality in our country, according to the Pew Research, is explained more than 80% by education, more than 80%. And one of the things is, for every Bill Gates who dropped out of college and made it rich, there are 500,000 people who are dictated by the rules that go with education and income. So you have a big job, but you're actually approaching it right by putting the learning component there, because that's what changes populations. Thank you all, and thank you, Craig, for your presentation. Fabulous insights, and it's good to know all of the things that you're thinking about. Fabulous insights.